Okay, we're here again. Nemesis, you reading it? Am I reading it? AI reading it? Shall I press button? Hello, everyone. Hope you have a great evening and hope you enjoy what we're going to do next.
Three, Day 2.
Come on then.
3, Day 2.
Yeah, try that again.
Storm helped Brand out to the van. Kyle was waiting in a no parking zone just outside the doors. He leapt out when he saw Brand stagger and just about managed to be there to help catch him as his legs gave out. He looked at Storm. Is he alright to leave? Storm smiled. Technically no, but we've gathered a doctor on our travels but lost Chris. It's a long story and it's Brand's to tell. Kyle shrugged. You know best. A doctor now, that could be handy. Storm nodded. But he comes with extras, not sure who yet. They are meeting us here. Kyle smiled. So the number grows. He looked up and a Volkswagen camper van drove around the corner and pulled up next to them. The doctor was driving. He wound down the window. You really did mean beaten up, didn't you? This is Rat and Stick. For some totally insane reason, whoever is dishing out invitations thinks they are useful. Rat really did look slightly ratty, and Stick was as thin as a person could be without being ill. They both looked up and smiled. Rat winked at Storm. We fix things, broken things. It is what we do. Of course we are useful. Who'd be without us? The doctor smiled. Well, I obviously can't be. So where are we going? I know where we are going according to the map, but are we going straight there or somewhere else first? Do you have others to pick up first? Storm wound the window down a little more. We have friends to pick up. This is Kyle, my brother. You've met Brand. Pleased to meet you, Rat and Stick. So shall we lead the way? Stick looked up. Can we take a detour to the library? Storm looked stunned. Are you sure? Rat looked at Stick and his face brightened. You aren't as stupid as you look, Stick, my lad. If we go to the library, we might be able to get our hands on books. No internet, no information. We need books. Good old-fashioned paper, heavy books. Come on, it has to be worth a try. They drove to the library, but they didn't stop. The black plume of smoke billowing out of the windows and the flames that reached nearly 10 feet above the building were enough to let them know that someone far less studious had got there first. Rat and Stick were swearing about it for most of the journey to the pub, but they cheered up considerably when they saw where they were going. Introductions done, everyone sat in the bar. Storm had brought Brand down a blanket as he was feeling cold, and Jerry had made him a cup of sweet tea. The doctor was seated beside him and was keeping a close eye on his patient. Brand looked up. We're going to have to move out, and fast. Frank walked over to stand in front of him, arms folded. Now why would that be then? You still haven't told us what happened to Chris. Brand leant back into the soft backing of the chair. I'm not going to tell the story out of order, as if I do it does look really bad for me. I worked for Chris' father. He's a big shot in the Lex Corp, Lex Industries Acquisitions Department. He found me through a friend and he wanted someone who would do some quiet removal work. Mostly elderly people in houses he wanted to get hold of. I basically had to make their life a misery until they moved out. Before you judge me, I was in a lot of debt. Tanya, my sister, was desperate for a baby and it was beginning to affect her health. She had 2 suicide attempts on record and that didn't help her case with the fertility clinic. They put it on her record that she was medically unfit to be a mother, so we had to get her the surgery that would help her have a baby without them. So I needed to get money fast to help her and I went to a loan shark. I was shooting pool down at my usual club and got talking to some bloke about the debt I was getting myself into. We downed far too many pints that night and he said he'd talk to someone he knew who could help me. The debts were piling up and I was also paying for a full-time carer for Tanya. She'd got pregnant, lost the baby and had made another failed suicide attempt which had left her in a wheelchair. I had my first meeting with Matthew Rollstone in his flash office in the London Dome. He seemed to be offering a reasonable package until I found out what the actual job was. I declined his most generous offer, and he told me I would reconsider. Of course I walked out. That afternoon my mother took a tumble down the stairs. They rushed her to hospital but it was too late, she died. I received a call on my mobile just as it would have happened from Rollstone's assistant, reminding me that there would be consequences and that my sister would be next. I had no option but to work for him, but I wasn't happy about it. It was about then that I met Chris in a chance encounter when she came screaming into the office when I was picking up some paperwork. She took a shine to me as she calmed down and was very polite to her father in front of me. He seemed impressed and although he acted as if he was outraged when she paid me compliments, I think he was quite happy that I was driving her around for a while. I am certain she started it all just to annoy her father, but he knew how to play her and she was at least behaving while she was with me. I have to admit I wanted to hit back at him a bit, so I wasn't completely innocent there. He was getting a peaceful life, but I don't think he realized the full extent of my duties. Or perhaps he did. She was a pretty girl, so what was the harm? I knew I was playing with fire, but after what he'd done I really didn't care. He'd moved Tanya into one of Lex's care homes and he pretty much owned me anyway. So I just added entertaining his daughter to my list of duties. She didn't approve of me being away working for him, so that stopped and I was very grateful for that. I became her driver full-time, which was a great relief. Anyway, Rollstone called me into his office and set it out for me in black and white. If I upset her before he told me to, then it would not go well for Tanya. At a time of his choosing he was going to get me to upset Chris and leave. I'd be paid off well and anything left of my debt would be wiped out. They were docking my pay to pay the debt. The only restriction was that I wasn't to sleep with her. It was a bit late for that clause, but somehow I managed to avoid any difficult questions. I think he honestly did believe that his daughter was a virgin at the time. I did a bit of digging and he'd had a lot of trouble controlling Chris. She had been the classic wild child and her addictions and problems were becoming more and more difficult for him to cover up. When she was with me, at least she was away from some of the more unpleasant influences in her life. I suppose I justified it to myself that I was her bodyguard with extra duties. Tanya took a turn for the worse when she got hold of some drugs at the home. They nearly lost her and she ended up on a life support machine. Rollstone actually took the time to call me in and told me himself. He assured me that every care would be taken of her. I was driven over to see her. She was unconscious, of course. I spoke to the doctors and they said it was unlikely that she would recover consciousness for a while. I left reassured, but as you can imagine, not at all happy. The months rolled into years and Tanya was still what they called stable and comfortable. I visited her as often as I could and spoke to her in case she could hear me. Steve swallowed hard. Should we go and try to get her? Franks cast him a sympathetic look. Steve, it's a good thought, but she was on life support. I would put money on it that it was only that machine keeping her breathing all those years just to keep Brand on the hook. Brand, what do you think? Brand looked a little shocked and thought about it for a moment. The room was neat and tidy. There were no notes hanging on the end of the bed. I noticed that other patients had little plastic hangers and paper notes attached to them. He looked down at his hands. I think I've been a fool. Frank cleared his throat. So we know he was a pretty nasty bit of work. How about his daughter? Can we expect any kind of fallout from this? Brand looked up at him, his eyes slightly watery. No doubt she will attempt something. She is a vicious, twisted, vindictive creature. I have seen what she can do to a friend who crossed her. I am expecting something. I wouldn't put it past her to have read my mail, so she probably knows about the location. Frank scratched his head. Did you use a laptop or computer on their system? Brand looked at all the faces intently staring at him. I bought myself a laptop out of my wages. It was on a whim, and I saw it advertised and liked it. No, it was independent to their network. I bought my own software. Frank smiled. Did you ever talk about the location with her? Brand thought hard. I don't think I did, and she wouldn't remember if I had. She was too distracted with trying to work out what to bring with her to actually ask where we were going. She would have seen the paperwork though. Thankfully she is pretty used to people sorting the technicalities out for her. She asks, she goes, or they entertain her. Frank nodded. Well, she may well have taken a photo of the Mac, but as her mobile is now dead she won't be able to retrieve it. Frank turned to the others. We might just have a break here if we can get ourselves out of here pronto. Not the plan, but we have to run with this. I want you all to pack up your rooms, get your stuff together and get it down here. Don't leave anything behind which could give them any clues. Once you are done, get down here yourselves and we'll start moving out the food and anything useful from this place. Come on people, move. Brand, I'll clear your room for you. What would you like me to do with Chris' things? Brand looked down. I don't know. Frank grunted. Very well, then we take no chances. I want you to ditch everything. Anything she ever gave you. Anything you got from the corporation. It's going to be hard, laddie, but we have to be sure. We will have to assume that she will go to her father. Where is he? It will give us some idea of how long we have. Well people, thank you for your time and I'll see you all back down here when we are ready to load the vehicles. Brand looked around everyone. I'm so sorry. He lives at Fairlight Castle, Hastings. That is way past Brighton, so quite a way, but I'm sure she'll find some muck to drive her. There was a flurry of movement as everyone headed for their rooms to pack. About an hour later they were downstairs again, putting boxes, tins and bottles into whatever packing boxes they had and shifting them out to the vans and an old Ford Connect. Chris has wandered through the hospital in a dream until a doctor caught her by the arm and she was led to a cubicle. Where's my bag? I want my bag, she demanded. It was on a chair in the room. The doctor left her with a nurse who sedated her. Chris fell back into a swirling dream. When she woke up she was in a bed, her stomach was bandaged and she had a drip in her arm. A nurse was passing and noticed that she was awake. Welcome back. She began taking her pulse and writing notes on a piece of paper. Now we're just about to sort ourselves out for the night. There are strict rules in place. Do not touch the candles. We have a little daylight left and the doctor is doing his last rounds. We have no emergency bell, so if you need anything you'll have to shout. Please don't panic, we have everything under control. Chris was far from being in a panic. She was too angry. She lay on the bed and her mind went over and over the past 5 years. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. When nobody was looking, she slipped out of bed and opened the cupboard beside it. She found her clothes in there and slipped them on. Her handbag was there and she checked through it. Nothing was missing. Her purse was full of money. She didn't count it, but it looked about right. She slung the bag over her shoulder and looked down at her blood-stained and ripped shirt. She pulled her jacket over it and zipped it up. She then pulled the hood up over her untidy hair, pulled the curtain back and wandered off down the corridor. A doctor stepped out from a doorway. She smiled at him sweetly. Do you know where my sister, Maureen Gallahan, is? The doctor smiled kindly. It would be best to go to reception by the main entrance. The lady there will be able to tell you where to find your sister. Chris smiled back at him. Thank you. Which way is reception? The doctor turned to face down the corridor. Back the way you came, turn right. There is no lift obviously, so you'll have to take the stairs. Reception is just along the corridor to the right when you get to the ground floor. Hope you find your sister all right. He smiled, turned and went off down the corridor. Chris bit the side of her mouth to hold back her anger that he had not looked at her in any way that indicated that he thought that she was attractive. Thank you, you have been very kind. She muttered, turned and tried to walk as casually as she could down the corridor before she made her way painfully down the stairs and past reception and out of the main doors. The concourse outside the hospital was full of people. The taxi rank had 1 or 2 cars in it. She went to the rank. People were going to cars but stepping away. She went to the first car. I want you to take me to Fairlight Castle, Hastings. The driver smiled. That will be £4,000 plus mileage. Cars that work are rare, you know. Chris took a deep breath, closed her eyes and then opened them again. Very well. The driver smiled. The £4,000 is in advance. Chris got into the taxi and opened her purse and counted her money. I'm a bit short. I only have £3,980. The driver smiled. I'll take it. The drive to Hastings was done in silence. The driver initially tried to engage her in conversation, but with her clipped answers and lack of dialogue and unwillingness to give him any information, he soon decided to give up trying. He looked nervous and kept taking a look at Chris in his rear-view mirror. She was sitting like a statue, staring ahead, lost in her thoughts. She seemed oblivious to all that was going on around her. She didn't notice the lost and bewildered people, the gangs, the looting, none of it. She was lost in her anger and planning her revenge. Many hours later the taxi pulled through the gates which proudly displayed the name Fairlight and drove up the drive. She got out onto the gravel path in front of the creamstone building as the driver opened his window. That will be £2,000 for the mileage. She smiled wickedly. I'm sure my father will take care of you. She turned and went through the white painted door which opened into a hallway. To the left there was a glass-fronted room which was an office. It was piled up with paperwork. open boxes and 2 useless computers on the 2 desks. The paperwork was so piled up that only the screen protruded. She looked inside and there was a box file open. It was the box which had contained the paperwork for the title her father had bought. She shrugged and carried on as the corridor turned right. The kitchen was also empty. It was a large room with a big central work area fixed in the middle with cabinets and work surfaces around the other walls. A banana hanger and fruit bowl sat on the work surface and various food boxes were scattered around. The black square crockery was in the sink waiting to be washed, but nobody was about. She left the room and carried on, looking in on the first door on the left, which was a library. It was a dark room with a lot of mahogany wood and a huge desk. Old bookcases lined the walls, floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound books. Rugs were on the carpet. One was a wolf pelt. A large painting of a muscular man with a wolf by his side hung on the left-hand side. The artwork was by an artist she loved, from the Slan magazine usually. He had done work for 2000 AD. The old-fashioned desk stood regally at the far side of the room under the window. The many books had been bought with the property. Her father had no intention of reading them. Like so many things, they were to give a good impression only. The wolf pelt and other Native American decorations like the spear which stood against the wall were from their many trips to the U.S. to visit the Choctaw Native American tribe. The room was empty, so she shut the door and carried on down the hallway with the worn-out carpet. On the right the corridor opened into the entrance lobby. They rarely used the front door, so she carried on again. A white sofa was in that area, but they never sat on it. She carried on through this, past the door to the haunted tower which had been such a source of amusement, and if she admitted to it terror on the nights she had actually spent here. The corridor carried on and opened up to the right. This was the formal dining room which they had used for many banquets and entertaining when her mother had been alive. A large banquet-sized table stood in the middle with chairs around it. On the wooden dresser there was a wolf carved as if emerging from the wood. That had come from a small shop in the lanes in Brighton. Memories of times gone by flitted through her mind as she walked on the dark aging carpet and looked around the place. Before she carried on, she walked back and went upstairs. She opened the door to her father's room. She had loved that four-poster bed. Photos and ornaments were lined upon a very modern shelf to her right, but what she wanted was in a box in the dresser. She had hidden it there. Inside the box were poems which Brand had written for her, letters and words which had made her think that he loved her. All lies she knew now, all worthless. She had actually found out that he'd sent the same to an ex as well. They were just weapons he had used to keep her tame and unquestioning. She pulled them out of her box and went back downstairs. In her mind she imagined that she had left him, and he was sitting there in the house emailing her with words from those poems. Probably sitting there with his new girlfriend trying to smooth things over so he didn't lose the money. But even that was a fantasy. Her mind slipped back to the day she had taken him to the house when her father was away and taken him to the bedroom down the hallway with the black sheets. It was then that she had noticed the brown stain on the ceiling. It was odd what she remembered. She walked as quickly as she could back downstairs. She was putting off finding her father, she wanted time with her memories first. She returned to the corridor and to the left there was a door slightly open. She could hear her father's voice demanding that someone spoke to him. She pushed the door. A foot-tall stone gargoyle statue sat beside the door just inside the door on the left. Probably a garden ornament, but it had ended up there. She went in and the well-used, slightly threadbare antique sofa faced her. The left-hand wall was bare, but there were windows along the far wall opposite the door. The table had been placed there with photographs of the family. The end of that wall was covered by a shelf unit completely stacked with DVDs, and the end wall a huge flat-screen television. 2 armchairs faced it, and her father was sitting at one of them. The wall behind her was mostly taken up by the huge fireplace. Now she had fond memories of that. When her father had been away, she and Brand had been in the house alone. He had taken that wolf pelt from the library and put it in front of the fire so that they could make love. This was not an image she wanted to see. The television screen was blank. Her father had his odd telephone on his lap. It looked like an old-fashioned typewriter. He was holding the receiver to his ear and shouting at it. As she entered, he slammed down the receiver and threw the telephone onto the floor. Damn thing, when will they fix the line? He looked up and put his laptop aside. Nothing is working, not even the lights. Then he saw her. My darling, what an unexpected surprise, welcome home. I can have Manfred make up your room for you. He stood up. He was a gaunt man, his face drawn, his grey hair neatly cut, his suit expensive. Chris burst into tears and ran to him. He hugged her, wrapping his long arms around her, and pulled her head onto his chest. What is the matter, my little angel? If you are frightened by all this, don't worry. It is being handled. I have my best men onto it, and Legs Corporation is bigger than all this. The computers will be up and running again soon. You shouldn't worry, you little head, about it. Where's Brand? He pulled her back from him and looked down at her. Chris wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. He attacked me, Daddy. He was furious. I don't know what got into him, and I love him so much. He kept screaming at me that you had bought him, and that now that his sister was more than likely dead, he was free of me. Then he took a knife and tried to kill me. Look at what he did. He tried to smash my face into a glass table, but I managed to pull away from him. She pulled up her shirt to show off the bandages. She then threw the letters and poems onto the floor and stamped on them. Look at all the lies he wrote to me. They were just words. I thought he meant them. I've just come from the hospital. He tried to slash my stomach. He said that he'd make sure you never have any grandchildren to carry on your evil line. Rollstone put his arms around her again. Don't worry, I'll make sure that he really suffers for what he's done to you. You should be in hospital. I'll call Manfred, he can take you. Chris choked on her tears. I don't want to go to hospital. They have dressed the wound and told me I can go home. Can you bring me a doctor here? I want to go after him as soon as I can, but I wanted my daddy first. I had thought he had someone else, and he has now told me I was right. I bet he has sent the same words to her as well. They are going off to make a wonderful life together in a sanctuary. They got a message which told them they would be safe there. He was going to take me, now he's taking her instead. He tore my invitation up, saying that I didn't deserve to be saved and that I should die with the rest of my wretched family. Rollstone held both her arms and stared down at her. His cold grey eyes were intent. A sanctuary. A message. Do you know where the sanctuary is? Chris swallowed and looked up at her father. Lots of people got a message by post just before it all shut down. It told them to go to the location where they would be safe. They are heading there now. They are there in a pub together. I was there too until this morning, and they are going on from there to somewhere in Wales. I think it said Abe or something. I can't bear it, Daddy. Oh, there's a man outside who drove me here. I gave him lots of money, all I had, and he wants more. He has my cash, nearly £4,000 of it, and a working car, and probably some petrol left to get him home, and he wants another pound 2,000. Rollstone smiled. Very useful, well done, darling. Back at the Black Lamb pub, everyone was gathered in the bar. Bottles had been pulled from the optics, and the optics carefully removed, wrapped in cloth and stacked in crates and boxes. Frank was looking at the mountain of equipment and out of the window at the three vehicles. Well, it's going to be a tight squeeze, but we should be able to get everything in. It's going to take us about a day to get to the location, and I'd rather we didn't stop on the way in case we encounter more trouble. Jereth, have you made up the food packages I asked for? Jereth looked up from behind the bar. I have. I've done them individually as I didn't know who was going in which car. There are enough for 2 meals each. Hopefully that will be enough. I've used the last of the food which won't travel, and they are in storage boxes with the cutlery in the bags. Not exactly a balanced meal, but enough to keep everyone going. Frank looked around the gathered people. We are going to have to decide who goes in which vehicle. This is going to be very school days, and Brand, you are excluded from getting up at the moment. Brand smiled. I feel fine now. Frank looked at the doctor. The doctor looked at Frank. He is okay. His dizzy spells are less now that he's making up the blood that he lost. He can get off his lazy butt now and get on with helping. He smiled. Brand was smiling too. Frank looked around the room. Now I want everyone who can physically fight to stand over there. Non-combatant, useful people over there. Brand, Kyle, Storm, Recco, Matt and Steve moved across the room. Rat and Stick looked at each other. Rat smiled and looked up at Frank. We're totally useless, but we fixed things. Jereth lifted a box onto the bar. I'm a barman. I'm a lover, not a fighter these days. I did basic training at Hendon, but that was years ago. I've been a desk jockey since then. Frank smiled. Rat, Stick, don't put yourselves down. In the days that follow, it is highly likely that the geek shall inherit the earth. This is your time. If you can build and rebuild, you are going to be what we most need. Jereth, don't worry about it. If cornered, I'm sure you'd make a good account of yourself. I want to split those who can fight between the vehicles. I'm sorry, Rat and Stick, but I'm not putting you both in the same vehicle. If anything happens and we lose a vehicle, I'd like at least one of you to survive. I'm going to split Recco, Matt and Steve between the 3 vehicles. If we get separated, then at least we'll have a mechanic per vehicle. Doc, if you could drive your camper. Kyle, if you could drive your van. I'll drive the Connect. There are only 2 seats in that, so if I take Steve with me, that might be best. I know a bit about car maintenance, so that may make up for his inexperience. Recco, if you go with Doc and Matt in Kyle's vehicle. Damn it, that doesn't work. Doc, do you mind if someone else drives your camper? It's packed too full to get anyone in the back. I need you with Brand for the moment, just in case. I need a mechanic and a driver in the camper. Recco, can you drive a camper and take Jereth and Rat? Recco smiled. I used to own one of those beauties. I traveled around most of Italy in my younger days and lived in one. Doc piped up. I only bought it second hand last week, so I don't have any emotional attachment to it. I would say if we have to stop over, I'd like the option to sleep in it, though if at any point it is empty enough. Frank laughed. That sounds fair enough. Doc, Stick, Matt and Brand if you go in the van with Storm and Kyle. Right. Get the food packs loaded and get everything into the vehicles. Then we can do a shakedown and a check around. I want to make sure that there is nothing left here that will indicate where we are going. We'll all do a room-by-room search and I want this place empty of anything that we can use as well. It took half an hour for everyone to complete their searches. They didn't find anything. They had gutted the place of anything useful already and it looked very bare. Even the curtains, all bed linen, all of the kitchen equipment and glasses had been packed around things so that they could withstand a bit of a bumpy ride. They were packed and ready to go. Jerry stood in the car park looking back at the building. Frank came to stand beside him. Sad. Jerry smiled. A little bit. I'd had such hopes when I moved here with the missus all those years ago. Who would think that I'm off on a great adventure and she's 6 feet under? Frank put a hand on his shoulder. Any children? Jerry shook his head. This place took up too much of our time. It was a complete millstone around our necks, but I'm still a little sad to go. Frank squeezed his hand. Come on, mate, time we were on the road. They all climbed on board their respective vehicles. The engines started and the vehicles rolled off of the car park and up onto the open road. The miles passed by and they didn't see any other moving vehicle until they turned onto the motorway. The slip road was almost completely clogged up and it took nearly an hour to push the cars out of the way so that they could join the single lane of cars which were still moving. The lane wasn't clear. Vehicles were trying to wind their way around abandoned and broken down vehicles. The slow progress almost ground to a halt and very soon there was a tailback for miles. Frank shut off his engine and jumped out of the van. He went to the other vehicles in turn. Turn off your engines, get out and push. We don't have the fuel for this. As soon as we get to a junction we'll get off and use the minor roads. That will be quicker in the long run. The turnoff was about a mile and by the time they got there they were exhausted from pushing the vehicles. Other people had followed suit when they saw what they were doing. Very soon there was a caravan of cars and vans being pushed as slowly as they would have been able to drive. They turned off, jumped back into the vehicles, and started up the engines. They were again on their way and a lot faster. Frank and Steve were in the front car. Kyle followed up in the van and Recco brought up the rear in the camper. They were making good time down narrow winding lanes when suddenly out from behind some trees they saw a large van being pushed across the road. Frank swore and stopped the car as a man and 6 boys leapt out from over a wall and surrounded them. The tallest of them shouted, "Get out of your vehicles." Frank got out first and the others followed. The boys went to each of the vehicles but Frank caught the first one by his arm and turned him around, hitting him with a sharp punch to the stomach so he buckled over. Kyle was just getting out and slammed his van door into a second one who had got far too close. Brand came out of the van like a wildcat and floored one nearest to him before he could raise his knife. It was difficult to tell them apart. They all wore blue jeans and a black hoodie, even the adult. The adult stepped in to take on Frank. He circled and by the way he was standing it was obvious he was military trained. Recco stood back from his and danced around. The lad was trying to punch him but couldn't reach until Recco leapt forwards and punched the boy in the face. He knocked him back against the camper. The boy grabbed his nose looking shocked. Recco and Steve then kicked him until he fell to the ground. Storm was out of the van by now and ran towards the one heading towards the camper van. She took a leap and kicked him, sending him sprawling onto the floor. She then sat on him as he was far smaller than her and had dropped his knife as he fell. Frank and his assailant squared off, then the man in front of him stepped back and took a defensive stance. "Don't I know you? But it can't be. I'm seeing things. I thought you died." Frank hesitated. "I don't generally associate with road pirates, so probably not." The adult hoodie removed his hood. "Commander Axis, it has been years since we were in the unit together. Okay, I know you were on secondment and put on some special project or something, but, hey, it is good to see you." Frank smiled at the surprisingly elderly man and looked thoughtful. "Now you are the last person I would expect to be in this sort of a game." Sennett smiled. "I wasn't. I'm not apparently. We needed vehicles, and you came along." Frank looked at the boys who were picking themselves up from the dirt of the road. "The oldest is barely 17. Sennett smiled as they staggered over to join him, nursing bleeding noses and injured limbs. "Well, probably not sons a father should be proud to introduce when they were just about to commit a crime. They are my boys all the same. 3 from my first marriage, 2 came with the second wife and the third was with the second wife. But then you probably already know some of that. I think I used to bore everyone silly with tales of the kids." Frank smiled wryly. "I'd say pleased to meet you, but under the circumstances that isn't wholly appropriate, is it?" Sennett smiled. "Not really, so where are you going?" Frank cast a glance at the others. "We're just getting out of town." Sennett looked at the boys. "Well, we'd better let this good man get on his way. I still can't believe it is you. I was absolutely sure you died on a recon mission out in Korea." Frank stepped forward and the two hugged. "For the sake of what the unit went through, I'll let this pass. That you could have some to this. Boys, your father was a good man, a noble fighter and a true friend. His military career was exemplary and his retirement well earned. There has to be more to your future than stealing. There are enough of you. Find yourself a little place and hole up. See what your skills are and see what you can do to survive." Sennett looked at his old commander. "Can we come with you?" Frank breathed in deeply. "I'd like to take you, but we have barely enough resources for those I do have with me. Unless you have somewhere to go, I would suggest that you hold up here and find somewhere that is easy to defend and see what you can build out of this new world." Sennett looked down at his feet. "I understand. We didn't exactly meet again under the best of circumstances. It looks like life has treated you kindly though. You don't look a day older than when I last saw you, and that was over 20 years ago." Frank smiled. "Goodbye, old friend." He turned and got back into the van. The others followed suit. The boys pushed the van out of the road and they were back on their way. Frank traveled in silence, lost in his thoughts. Steve was looking at him and hoping that he would speak, but not wanting to disturb him. He was about to ask what he was thinking about, but shut his mouth and went back to looking out of the window. After a couple of hours, his thoughts and curiosity got the better of him. He watched Frank driving and then looked out of the window for a while. All the time he was formulating the question in his head which he could contain no longer, so he had to ask. "Did you really know him all those years ago? Why didn't we take them with us?" Frank grunted. "How could I have known him? If I look the same as I do now and it has been 30 years, that would put me in my late 90s. I'm not quite that old. But it solved the situation, so I let him think what he wanted to think.
Jazz.
If he is happy thinking he saw one of his old buddies, who am I to burst his bubble? We cannot take everyone with us, or anyone who hasn't had an invitation. No doubt they were chosen and vetted for their skills. Whoever made the decision about who should go there made it for a reason. It is likely that he has had trouble adjusting to any kind of civilian life, and he is leading those boys down a very difficult path. In a world like this they will do all right. Previously I would imagine things would have been very different. That is not the basis on which to build anything. Steve shrugged. You are probably right. Doesn't make it feel any better though, does it? Frank smiled. There were very few cars on the road. Most that did work stopped when the petrol ran out. That was the problem. They then blocked the road. Pushing the cars out of the way made it very slow going. Where it could have taken a few hours to get to their destination, it was almost nightfall and they were still miles away. Frank was still concentrating on the road intently. Steve was watching him. Frank, would you like me to take a turn driving? You must be tired by now. Frank smiled. He didn't look at all tired. I'd love you to, but I'm not stopping this vehicle for anyone. Look at those people out there, they are desperate. We can think about that when we get to the open countryside, but not while there would be people about. We can't afford to lose in one of the vehicles now. We're going to be cutting this fine anyway when it comes to petrol, so best we just keep plodding on. Steve looked at the people they were passing. They were standing beside their cars looking into the distance. Do you think those cars worked, or have they been waiting all this time? Frank looked at the tired faces of the people they were passing by. You've seen the advertising. Wait by your car to be rescued. They have paid their memberships. They expect a patrolman to be along sometime soon. Even if their mobiles aren't working, they would expect to be rescued. That's the problem. If we stop, they are going to want us to help. If we help one, we will have to help others. Look, there is someone who is stuck. I'll give it a go and I think you will see what I mean. But be ready to get away quickly if they try to take our vehicle. The bonnet was up of a Volkswagen Golf and there was a group of people standing around it. Frank pulled up. Any idea what is wrong? The group looked confused. Nobody answered, so Frank got out of the car and looked into the engine. He stood up. The crowd turned to look at him as if he was some guru about to proclaim something magnificent. The manifold is bust, I think. She's head in the water. A woman who was closest to him screamed. It's a working car. She then made a lunge at Frank. Frank's quick reflexes saved him from being grabbed by the woman. He dodged, jumped into his own car, put up the window and drove off. He cast a sideways glance at Steve. Do you see what I mean? Things like this change people. Rational folk soon turn nasty. It brings out the worst in them. Fear, that is what is changing them. No, we keep going until the petrol runs out or we get there. They drove through the evening. As they got to the more remote roads, traveling got easier as there were fewer abandoned vehicles. Those that were abandoned had been pushed to the side of the road by the old tractors. They seemed to be working perfectly well, and they saw one or two working their way down the lanes, using their snow shovels to push the cars onto what verge there was, into ditches or down banks just to get them out of the way. Frank stopped the Connect beside one of the tractors and wound down his window. The farmer opened his door but didn't get down from his cab. Evening to you. The farmer smiled warmly. Strange why all these cars just stopped working. Some of them look pretty new. Frank smiled. Most of the vehicles have stopped completely. There are vehicles everywhere. The farmer took off his cap and rubbed his forehead. Well, it was a bit like that around here, but we've managed to clear the road. I've moved at least 12 cars today. Way's clear all the way to Aberystwyth now though. Frank laughed. Thank you for your good work. I'll wish you a good night then and good luck. The farmer smiled. I'll wish the same to you. He shut the door, started the engine and drove off. Frank started his engine as did the other vehicles. The farmer was right. The road to Aberystwyth was clear. The town was a different story. As they came to the little roundabout which went into town, there was only one through route. Cars were abandoned everywhere, but a path had been cleared. It was past midnight and there were few people about. They passed a football ground and cars had been towed or pushed onto there. They were lined up across the grass. As they approached the main roundabout, smoke billowed across the road from the burning supermarket, petrol station and fast food restaurant. Movement was slow going, negotiating the abandoned vehicles through the smoke, but finally they managed to maneuver up the hill and onto the coast road. As they looked back at Aberystwyth, the library on the hill was on fire, as were many other large buildings. Along the roadside some buildings were smoking ruins where they had burnt earlier. Some had broken windows where looters had already cleared them out. Everywhere was in darkness, although the odd figure could be seen moving about in the shadows as their headlights illuminated the depths of the night. They didn't stop. They drove on up into the hills until they came to a quiet country back road. It was hardly a B road, but it was wide enough for them. They climbed a small hill and came to a stone-built farmhouse on their right. It was facing into a courtyard. Its side wall with no windows faced the road. Over the high wall, as they looked up, they could see the upstairs windows which were lit by candles. Over the side gate they could see that there were obviously people moving about in the yard. As they approached, the people scuttled off into the shadows. The large wooden farm gate opened inwards into the main courtyard, and main house and farm buildings surrounded the yard. Across the back of the large yard there was a large rough stone barn with huge wooden doors, and to the right a long stone barn with a line of stable doors. The other side of the road was thick woodland which almost cut out the moonlight, so there was little illumination on the road. It was difficult to see much more in the dark. There were candles burning in lanterns on the gate posts, and as they approached the gate, two dark figures stepped out of the shadows to meet them. Frank got out of the connect. Steve did the same, and they both walked over to the gate. They were met by two tall and well-built men dressed in black army surplus uniform. The one on the right had long wavy blonde hair, the one on the left dark hair. It was impossible to define them in the darkness. What was easy to define was that they were carrying shotguns broken over their arms, but as they stepped forwards they pulled them into the locked firing position. Both took a defensive stance, though they were clearly untrained, lethal all the same at that range. "Who are you?" the one of the right pronounced in a commanding deep voice. Frank stood with his legs slightly apart and his hands up, palms facing them. "We are unarmed. We were sent a message to come here. I am Frank. This is Steve." The blonde-haired man smiled, which made him suddenly appear far less sinister. "So you don't have last names then? You look like you could be useful and handle yourself. So you are Steve?" He turned to Steve. Frank smiled. "You know, you are the first person to ask. I am Frank Menzies." Steve tried his best smile, but he couldn't keep his eyes off of the shotgun. I'm Steve Rogers. Pleased to meet you. Who are you? The blonde nodded. I am Eric Masters and this is Shylock. He prefers not to use his old name. You have others with you. He pulled a piece of paper out of his jacket pocket and a torch and checked their names were on the list. Frank smiled. Yes, quite a few. All with invitations. Eric's face dropped, then he realized that Frank was reacting to this. No offense meant, but blimey, we've got to find beds for your lot. Did you bring any bedding? Frank smiled. Don't worry, we did. We have got plenty and some to spare, camp beds and other equipment. Eric seemed to brighten up a lot. It has been a busy day. We've got quite a few people already here. Nearly everyone on the list though, and sadly not everyone will make it here. Frank looked about. It's pretty quiet on the roads now. It looks like most of the vehicles which did work to start with have packed up, lack of petrol. Eric turned to Shylock. Do you want to stay here and I'll show them in? Shylock nodded. They both rebroke their shotguns over their arms and Shylock stepped aside. Eric stepped forwards. Bring your vehicles inside. We're about to shut down for the night and put on the electric fence. Frank looked quizzical. Eric smiled kindly at him. Oh, didn't you know, it was only the computers which shut down. That took the grid down, but we're not on the grid and thankfully we didn't use a computer to regulate our solar, wind and other power. We've a way to go with most of it, but the basics are in place. This caught Raven out a bit, and with just the two of them it was such slow going that they didn't get most of the things done. The parts are here though. We've got the equipment, and now that we have all these extra hands to help, who knows what we'll be able to achieve. Pull your vehicles in and we'll find you somewhere to bed down. While you are coming in I'll go get Raven, she'll want to meet you. This is her place and she's the one in charge. They pulled into the yard and parked up under an open-fronted barn which Eric had pointed out to them. Their vehicles couldn't be spotted from the road in there. There were already other vehicles there, covered in tarpaulin. More tarps were pulled out from the pile at the end of the barn ready to cover their vehicles. They waited in silence, but Eric soon came back with a slim dark-haired woman about 5'7", dressed in jeans, boots and a heavy military coat. Her hair was untidy and she looked tired and worried. He stopped in front of them. This is Raven. Raven looked at them all. You are very welcome. Well done on negotiating the road out there. I expect you have had a long and difficult journey. Don't worry, we'll make you as comfortable as we can tonight. It might have to be a bit make do tonight and we'll try and sort out something more permanent in the morning. Our concern at the moment is getting everyone under cover, supplied with a bed and fed. Have you eaten? There's a stew on the go on the Rayburn in the kitchen. Get yourselves in there first and get some warm food inside you if you would like to eat. The stove will keep it hot for an hour or two, but we can't keep it burning all night as we have a limited wood supply. We need to shut it down tonight burning then. Follow me now and I'll show you where you can bed down. There's no light in there. Do you have torches? Also grab anything else you want from your vehicles so we can get them tarped up. Just a precaution. It is going to be a bit Wild West for a while, and although we have guards if anyone sneaks in, we want to make it as hard as possible for them if they do. Kyle opened the side door of the van and delved into a plastic box by the door. He came out with a handful of torches which he handed around so they all had one and a couple of large lanterns. Raven nodded her approval. Good. That is what I like to see, people who come prepared. We're trying to keep light to a minimum out here in case it attracts unwanted guests. Call me paranoid if you like, but I'd rather expect trouble and it doesn't happen than be caught out when it does. Any of you good in a fight? That's what I really need right now. Frank smiled, but it was lost in the darkness. One or two of us have had a chance to prove our skills already over the past few days. Don't worry, we can help out there too. Raven looked reassured. Sorry for rushing ahead. There are quite a few things to think about and not a lot of time to get things sorted if we are going to have a safe night. I must sound totally paranoid to you, sorry about that. She led them across the yard and over to the stables on the right-hand side of the yard. They got to the stable doors and she opened one for them and pulled back the material which hung over the doorway. The stables had been cleaned out and a fresh layer of straw had been laid down. They smelled of sweet straw and a sugary aroma. There were camp beds set up and wooden pallets with mattresses on them made of what looked like curtains sewn together and stuffed with straw. Raven stepped aside so they could pass by her. Sorry, not much privacy at the moment. The stable doors were independent, but the long barn beyond was one long building. We've got some old sheets and rope, so I'm sure you can rig something up later. The mattresses are a bit makeshift, but I've tried them out. They aren't too bad. For tonight, let's just hope we all survive, eh? If you have weapons, don't leave them in your vehicles. Get them out and keep them with you. As I've said, we aren't expecting anything tonight, but you never know. We don't have enough medical supplies to take any chances. Doc piped up. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm a doctor and I've brought as much as I could steal from the hospital with me. Frank looked horrified. You mean you stole from a hospital? Doc grinned. Damn right I did. I knocked off some antibiotics and I raided a room downstairs where they kept the materials scheduled for incineration. Bandages have a shelf life. These had passed their date, but they are better than nothing. The ward sister was running a scan where she was signing off medication and bandages to be incinerated and then removing them to sell on. I liberated them as there isn't anything actually wrong with them. Frank looked reassured. Okay then, well, I have some medical supplies in my van too. I bought some the week before all this happened as a friend emailed me out of the blue and asked me to. I guess he won't be dropping by to pick them up to take them abroad now to help in the war zone, but they will be very handy here. Raven was listening intently. Now that is great news. We barely had more than a few plasters and some TCP here. Now, get yourself sorted with somewhere to sleep. We'll check what you have in the morning and we can start to sort out some sort of inventory. If it is all right with you for us to assimilate it what we have. People have arrived earlier, we haven't looked at what they have brought with them yet. If I forget anything, please pipe up and ask. I don't bite and I'm only in charge because I own the place. That doesn't mean that I know everything and that I can do everything. If I am wrong, please tell me. The toilets are composters just across the yard. Have you used them before? Blank looks met her question. Well, they don't flush for a start. You have to put down a scoop of sawdust and that is enough. I've written out instructions which are taped to the wall and there is a torch on a string. Please try to follow them. Reading them by torchlight won't be easy. There's a water collection point beside it and a tap from the container for hand washing. It is grey water. It came from the bath and it will run on into a collection point to go into our water harvesting system. Where possible, we have disinfectant which you can put on a towel and use. There is hand wash and spray in the composting toilets. If you keep your own cloth with you, spray your hands and wipe it off. That will save us water. Also, if you have handled anything dirty, please use the wash. There is a box of little bottles. If you would like to carry one with you to use, you are welcome to. If you get any cuts or scratches, then spray or disinfect them immediately. We can't take any risks even though we do have a doctor now. She smiled at Doc. Doc, if you have any ideas, put them together. Hopefully everyone will meet together tomorrow and we can sort out things like that. If you handle any of the animals and they are all pretty friendly, please wash or disinfect your hands afterwards. I am guessing you haven't lived on a farm and your resistance to the bugs around here is going to be minimal. Sadly, a product of the ultra-clean society most people lived in. Sorry, it is a farm and by nature they are dirty places. If you handle stable doors and any other equipment, wash your hands. It's a simple rule. I will say it again as it is very important. If you get a cut, it is serious now. You won't be being a hero and being brave about it if you ignore it. You will be a liability when it gets infected and we have to look after you. I can't emphasize this enough. Even with whatever the good doctor has been able to bring with him, we will have limited supplies as we are not talking days here. It will be years if we are lucky. Now, if that hasn't given you enough to produce some really colorful nightmares tonight, I'll wish you a good night. As said, get yourselves a good hot meal inside you. Please do not wander about after you have got your equipment, and if you want to come to the house, please move as quickly as you can across the yard so that the guards can see you. Please don't sneak, that could end badly. We will be in lockdown and any movement will be treated as suspicious. Any questions? There was silence. Raven smiled. Good. Well, I will wish you a good night in case we don't bump into each other again. I'll see you in the morning. Don't worry about talking and staying up late. As long as you are in the stable, the guards will leave you alone. If you want food, go and get it now. If you go to the toilets, go straight across the yard. We are all amateurs at this, even the guards, so don't be suspicious or give them any reason to get jumpy. I hope you will be as happy as you can be here. I'm sorry if there is a lot to take in all in one go. This is all pretty new to all of us and we've all only had a few days to get used to this different way of living. I'm trying to make sure you have the basics and nothing bad happens by accident. I'm sure you are sensible and you can see why I'm saying what I'm saying. Tomorrow we can all meet up and we can discuss a long-term plan. If you need anything, I'll be over at the house. Good night, sleep well and welcome to your new home. She left them in a stunned silence and almost ran across the yard as someone had appeared at the door and was beckoning her, and he looked like he was in a panic. Raven crossed the yard. Every muscle in her body seemed to be aching and her head was spinning. A million worries crammed into the small space which was the conscious thought that she could deal with. The figure at the door had disappeared as soon as she started crossing the yard. She leapt up the stairs and closed the door, leant against it and closed her eyes for a moment. Her eyes stung and felt gravelly. Then she took a deep breath and strode off into the kitchen. Frank turned to the others. She seems to have things under control. We'd better get what we need from the vehicles and lock up for the night, as she said. It is late. Anyone hungry? There was a stunned silence. Okay, let's get sorted and get bedded down. We still have some of the food from the journey. We can bring our own bedding in and sort everything else in the morning. Storm and Brand crossed the yard to the vehicles and Storm opened the side door and started taking out bags. There are sleeping bags and other bedding in these. It will make it a little easier and warmer. Smell that air, it's going to be a cold one. Her breath was forming clouds in the chilled air. I'm guessing that lighting any kind of fire in there is a definite no until we get more organized, so I'll leave the oil lamps and candles here. Can you think of anything? Brand watched her in the semi-darkness. No, it sounds like you've got it covered as well. We can sort ourselves out in the morning when there is more light. He grabbed the majority of the bags. Storm locked the van and they made their way back across the dark yard to the stable. Frank had come across the yard too. He was quick and went straight back. The light from a lantern that Frank had brought from his van was a stark contrast to the yard outside. They stepped back inside, closed the stable door and pulled the brand new bolt across on the inside. Storm pulled across the heavy curtain which looked like it had once been a bedspread. She smiled. Ah, I see how they keep the light from showing out into the yard now, and it should make it warmer. Brand put the bags down and they shared out the bedding. They also began to make the beds. Kyle had set up 2 beds in the corner of the stable for himself and Storm went over and started making the beds up. Brand took one near the door, as did Frank. Brand looked up from tucking in his blankets. Are we going to post a watch tonight? Frank thought about it. Good thinking, but are any of us up to that? If they were going to take us out, they wouldn't have given us a lock on our door. I tend to agree with Raven's thinking. We can lock ourselves in and let the guards do their job. We'll be fitting in with the rota, so we will have to trust that the guards are out there. Get your head down, lad. It will be a long day tomorrow, and my guess is that your physical fitness will mean you are going to be called on to do a fair bit of the work around here. Doc, keep an eye on him. So sleep, all of you, while you can. They climbed into their sleeping bags fully dressed. Nobody wanted to get changed in front of strangers, and the chill in the air made sleeping in their clothes a good option. After a round of good nights, and a good night John Boy which caused a round of giggles for those who remembered the show, Frank turned the lantern off and they all drifted off into a tiredness-induced sleep despite their worries. They were awoken from their sleep by a gunshot which seemed to echo around the stable, launching nearly everyone out of bed. They were confused in the dark and strange surroundings. Storm nearly fell off of her bed as she was in a sleeping bag and tried to get up. She managed to unzip it and grabbed for her torch and turned it on. Frank grabbed it and turned it off again immediately. He waited until he had lost the flash on his retina caused by the torch. Once he could see in the dim light again, he pulled back the makeshift curtain, opened the door a crack and looked out into the courtyard. The yard seemed clear, illuminated by the lights from the house and a security light from the barn to his right and what looked like headlights to his left. He slipped his jacket on while he was watching and indicated to everyone to be quiet and stay put. There was a revving of engines and something large and metal crashed through the front gate, followed by the loud cracking sounds of gunfire. The yard was lit up by the muzzle flash of firearms going off. Frank ducked down and waited until the initial burst of gunfire died down. Then it was silent. Nothing moved outside. They waited what seemed like an age before they heard a door open somewhere across the yard. Frank couldn't see who it was. It was dark and there was a large 7.5-ton van in the way. There was a single shot and a scream followed by more gunfire. Frank pulled a pistol out and whispered, "Brand, shut the door behind me and lock it." He opened the door very slowly and very quietly and slipped out into the darkness. Brand shut the door and pulled the bolt across. It was silent in the courtyard as Frank slipped into the shadows. He could see figures hiding his side of the van. They were intent on watching the guards and people in the house. He crept along the ground in the darkness and crawled underneath the van until he came to the front wheel. He slipped out and climbed up the side of the van and made sure he had a good foothold. He swiftly raised himself up so he could see inside. He was now on the house side. There was someone hunkered down behind the passenger door opposite. As he looked down, he saw the body of the driver slumped over the steering wheel. The telltale bullet hole in the windscreen and its spider cracking told him all he needed to know. He swung down and rolled underneath the van. Frank crawled back along underneath the van and very gently undid the shoelaces of the army surplus paraboots of the man who was hiding beside the van and tied them together. He took a length of strong fishing line from his pocket and tied one end to the laces and slid to the other shadowy figure who was crouched down behind the first. He gently passed the line around the foot, pulled it as tight as he dared and tied it close to the ankle. He then took out his lighter and set light to the man's other trouser leg, which as he was crouching down soon spread to his jacket. Frank then rolled back under the van. The man who had been crouching soon noticed that his leg and jacket were on fire. He jumped up and sideways, pulling the other man off of his feet. Frank rolled out behind the man who now lay on the floor trying to get up with his feet tied together and knocked him out with the butt of his pistol. He then put his gun to the head of the man who had just managed to put his trouser fire out. "I think I might ask you a few questions. You in the van, come out." The van door opened, giving Frank mere moments to evaluate the situation, spot that the man was armed, ready to fire. Frank fired a shot and caught the man squarely between the eyes. The man in the van had no time to shoot. His gun fell from his lifeless hand and he fell out of the van onto the floor. Eric was holding Shylock against the wall. "I could use some help over here. We need to get that gate barricaded. Shylock has been shot." Brand unbolted the door and they all ran out. There were people emerging from all over. Some made for the gate and began pulling farm machinery and any debris that they could find into the gateway. The doc ran over to Shylock and gently laid him down. He took a look at the bullet wound. "I need to get him somewhere a bit more sanitary. Have you set up a medical room yet?" Raven appeared beside him. She was cradling a bleeding arm. "We have a room off the kitchen we'd earmarked for that. Ralph, can you give him a hand?" "Darren, that's right. Get that vehicle moved into the gap but block up underneath it. We need to get that electric fence set up again. David, you know about that sort of thing. Can you get some others and get it sorted? Come on, they may not be alone. We now know we don't have the time we thought we did. If we want to survive, we've got to get this place locked down and safe. The gate isn't our only weakness. This place leaks like a sieve tonight. Anyone got a knowledge of electrics?" Frank and Brand stepped over to her. She smiled at them. "Great, well, you guys work it out between you. We have rolls of electric fencing, posts and the attachments that you can run the fencing through. We can wire it either to the batteries, they are all charged, or you can attach it to an inverter. 240 volts should deter anyone. Darren, you know this, you know where everything is. There are extra torches in the storeroom. Use them if you have to, but remember to put the batteries on charge when you have finished." She turned, saw something and rushed off. In a matter of an hour the farmyard was transformed. Vehicles had been moved to form an impenetrable barricade at the gateway, and they had managed 3 lines of electric fence tape around anywhere that someone could get into the courtyard, as well as the fencing and gates. Frank checked the bodies of those who had broken in. 2 had survived, so he tied them up and put them in a small barn and locked the door. He then went into the house and spotted Raven sitting in a side room. She saw him outside and beckoned him in. He stepped over the threshold, conscious that this was probably her private space. She offered him a seat. He sat down opposite her and smiled. "Well, it's locked down out there and most of the people have now gone back to sleep. How about you? You look tired too." Raven sighed and offered him a drink. He took a brandy off of her and she poured one for herself. "I'm too worried to sleep. I know I've missed something important. I can't help feeling that something is wrong. I'm just checking the food and supplies inventory. It doesn't look too bad, but it could have been better. Hopefully the newcomers have things with them. We have a good basis anyway. The animal feed will be better when Crow gets back. We are very low and I'm having to share it around. Fuel isn't too bad but could be better. Not a high priority as we try not to use the generators." Frank smiled. "You have done a fantastic job here getting it all set up. Now you have some help. Do you have a husband or partner? When do we get to meet him?" Raven looked down. "He went off to pick up animal feed before all this kicked off, and he said he was going to stop off at a neighbor's farm to make sure she's all right on his way back as her husband is away. I would imagine he will make sure everything is all right there before he comes home. He has been helping them a lot lately. So he won't be back tonight as the farmer's wife will probably need some company as she'd be on her own otherwise." Frank looked serious. "What about his responsibilities here? He's left you alone to organize all this tonight." The smile fell from Raven's face. "I have managed. Crow didn't say much other than she has asked for help. I know that she cooks for him and has more time to keep their place a lot cleaner and tidier than I have time for. I think she probably pays him more attention as she isn't tied up with all this. I've got enough to worry about here, so not having to worry about him and his needs as well could be a good thing." Frank gave her a sympathetic look. They were still awake and chatting when dawn came up. Somewhere a cockerel crowed. Frank put his hands on his knees and got up. "I think I'd better get a bit of shut-eye." He looked around the room at the old cabinets and threadbare rug. "Thank you for your company and I'll see you later. Why don't you try and grab some sleep?" Raven smiled. "I think I will, see you later."